Good afternoon. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the first webinar of the Housing and Habitat Policy Dialogues, a quarterly webinar series being organized by the Center for Public Policy on Housing and Habitat at the National Institute of Urban Affairs. The Center for Public Policy, established at NIUA by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India, with the objective of developing a strong knowledge ecosystem around housing and habitat, undertaking and curating evidence-based research, and promoting discussion and dialogue on various issues and solutions associated with the housing and habitat ecosystem. It is particularly fitting that we begin this series with the theme Global Housing Challenge: Learnings for and from India. Housing has emerged as one of the defining challenges facing cities across the world. But the housing challenge is not simply about the number of houses that need to be built, it is also about affordability, access to land, finance, infrastructure, planning, rental housing, location, livelihoods, as well as the institutional systems that enable housing to be delivered at scale. For India, this challenge is particularly significant. India's urban population is projected to reach 595 million by 2036, an increase of around 58% over 2011. At the same time, the housing requirements of our cities are also growing in scale and complexity, and our housing policies and implementation approaches continue to evolve. This makes international experience particularly relevant. The recently launched UN Habitat World Cities Report 2026, titled The Global Housing Crisis Pathways to Action, provides an important global perspective on these challenges. Many of its findings and recommendations resonate very strongly with India's contemporary urban housing context. Today's webinar therefore provides us an opportunity to reflect on what India can learn from the experience of other countries and cities, and what can India's own experience contribute to the global discourse on housing. We will explore this through three lenses today: the global perspective, India's national experience, and also the experience of the Indian cities. We are very pleased to have Sri Kuldeep Narayanji, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India, as the chair of today's webinar. We are also very honored to have Ms. Anna Claudia Rosbach, United Nations Under Secretary General and Executive Director, UN Habitat, as our keynote speaker. Although Madam is unable to join us live today, she has very kindly recorded a keynote message specially for this webinar. May I now request the team to play her keynote address.
Excellencies, honorable guests, distinguished delegates, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon to all of you. Namaskar. The global housing crisis is one of the defining urban challenges of our time, a central test of whether cities can remain inclusive, resilient, and just. Housing is not merely shelter. It is the foundation of dignity, health, opportunity, and sustainable living. The World Cities Report 2026 shows that this crisis is systemic, global, and worsening. Nearly half of humanity is affected. Around 3 billion people lack adequate housing. More than a billion people live in informal settlements and slums. Global deficits grew from 251 million units in 2010 to 288 million in 2023, and an estimated 64 million evictions occurred between 2003 and 23. We must recognize housing as an organizing system of urban development, shaping access to jobs, education, transport and services, determining exposure to climate risk, and determining whether growth remains inclusive. When housing systems fail, cities become more unequal, less livable, and more vulnerable to shocks, jeopardizing our commitment towards achieving the new urban agenda and SDG 11. Addressing the crisis will require us to explore new forms, including non-ownership models, recognize the socio-economic function of housing, address tenure security, and design programs that are people-centered. And indeed, progress is possible. India's Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana is a shining example of how well-designed cities can help advance affordability and housing access at scale. The World Cities Report 2026 is both a warning and a call to action. It proposes a new social contract for housing, restoring public purpose to housing systems and rebalancing the roles of governments, markets and communities, consistent with UN Habitat's Strategic Plan 2026-29 that places adequate housing, land and basic services at the core of urban transformation. With political will, partnership and implementation at scale, adequate housing can be a reality that is accessible to all. I would like to congratulate the Government of India and the National Institute of Urban Affairs on this timely initiative of setting up the Center for Public Policy on Housing and Habitat. I have no doubt that the Center will play a key role in shaping India's response to the emerging needs in the country and, more importantly, advance models that can be a lighthouse for the Global South. I would like to assure you of UN Habitat's highest commitment to supporting India in its pathway towards sustainable, affordable and accessible housing for all. My very best wishes for all future initiatives. Thank you. Dhanyavad.
Very much, Ms. Rosbach, for that insightful keynote message and for setting the global context for today's discussion. The message provides us an excellent starting point to examine the global housing challenge and, more importantly, the pathways through which countries and cities are responding to it. We will now turn to the UN Habitat World Cities Report 2026, titled The Global Housing Crisis Pathways to Action. The report brings together experiences from across the world and examines the challenges and pathways for addressing the global housing crisis. Importantly, for today's discussions, many of these findings do resonate strongly with the contemporary housing challenges of Indian cities. We are pleased to have three colleagues from UN Habitat, two from the headquarters and one from India office with us today to take us through the report. Mr. Shubhagato Dasgupta is Chief Planning and Finance, UN Habitat. Dr. Mattis van Ostrom is a researcher at UN Habitat's Global Research and Analytics section. Mr. Nilesh Rajadhaksha is the country program manager at UN Habitat office in India. This session will bring together the global perspective of the World Cities Report, and we will try to align the Indian perspective to it. Dr. Shubhagata, may I now hand over the platform to you?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. And may I share screen?
Yes, you may.
Okay. Thank you. Warm greetings from Nairobi, from the headquarters of UN Habitat. It's wonderful to be among my community, so to say, and delighted to see JS and you, Debolina, and colleagues. Uh, mm, I will take a couple of minutes to kind of run you through the context around the World Cities report, how it speaks to the global processes that are anchored at UN Habitat, and then hand it over to Matthias to take, who was a core part of the team that developed this report, to talk you through the findings of the report. And then finally, Nilesh can come in with a few takeaways for India. I have a couple of slides, and I'll share them now if it works. There's a background. Why is screen? Right. Is it visible?
Not yet. Yes, it is.
Ah. Great. As I mentioned, this is the wider context of the World Cities Report, essentially speaking to the global intergovernmental processes that it is been part of and informing. Uh, one of the key elements of this has been the analysis of what the housing issues were and that was put together in a resolution adopted by all member states called Resolution 27 in 2023 and adopted at the UN General Assembly, which talks about affordable housing for all. At that time, it was recorded that 1.6 billion people lived in inadequate housing. There was a growing disparity, and there is a regression in the SDG 11.1 figures at that time, what was analyzed. And hence, all member states got together to create this resolution on the basis of which a whole set of normative work has started off. This process continues till the next Habitat Assembly, which is in 2029. As part of one of the main elements of this is the open-ended intergovernmental working group on adequate housing, which is putting together a whole set of documentation and policy directions which member states are signing off on, and will then finally be presented through a resolution again in 2029 and hopefully adopted by member states. Over the period 2023 through this period of 2027, every year there is a meeting of this intergovernmental open-ended working group, but they are intersected by a number of intersessional meetings which involve governments and government-nominated experts. It has expert group meetings of global academicians from case studies from across the world. And so it is a well laid out process that UN Habitat has been supporting to come to a global set of norms and strategies around adequate housing. Given the nature and acceptance of housing to become that it has become a global challenge, no longer a challenge only for the global south and restricted to a few countries, but it's a crisis that's being faced across the world. Hence, in the UN Habitat Strategic Plan for 2026 to 2029, again accepted by approved by member states, has put housing, land, and basic services for all at the center. And hence, also both UN Habitat, the executive director, we are all excited that the government of India has also put together a center to work on issues in country and to make good examples available to all. The part of the intergovernmental processes of there has been this year has been quite an urban year in the intergovernmental processes because SDG 11, which is where UN Habitat is the custodian agency for, where UN Habitat does all the measurement around. A progress update was agreed to and discussed at the General Assembly. And also this year is when it's 10 years since the adoption of the New Urban Agenda in Quito in 2016, and the New Urban Agenda is still the next Habitat Forum in 2036. It's a halfway review of that. And both of these documents align with the open-ended working group because they do bring out the fact that a key concern in addressing SDG 11, as well as the NUA outcomes, are driven from the fact that adequate housing has been receding over the last 10 years or so. So essentially, the idea is to say that there is a lot of alignment around these intergovernmental processes and what we are hearing from member states. And hence, the World Cities Report is one of the key elements of this work plan, where in the World Urban Forum, which has turned out to be one of the largest UN conferences, was the flagship report presented there. Other than the World Cities Report, also we have regional implementation roadmaps as well as housing solution hubs, which UN Habitat is using to operationalize some of the findings and the strategies that governments are agreeing to as part of the open-ended intergovernmental working group on adequate housing. With this, I'll stop sharing. Thank you. Just to give you a background of where we are with the intergovernmental processes, and hand over to Matthias to take us through the report. Thank you. Matthias, over to you.
Thank you very much, Shubhagato. Let me try to share my screen also with the presentation on my end. Thanks in any case for having me. I've been actually working on issues in India for a long time, so it's a real pleasure to be here. And I'm also just reflecting on the, yeah, I think it's working now, but please let me know if you can see the screen. But just reflecting on the institute that you're launching, and I think it's quite great that it's not just about housing, but it's about housing and habitat, right? Which makes those connections to the wider city explicit, which I think is absolutely key in addressing the housing crisis. So I will take you sort of through a brief overview of the report, focusing mostly sort of on a global framing and the way that UN Habitat sees the global housing crisis. But I've tried to put in a few examples of some of the things that the report talks about in terms of the Indian context. Of course, I can't go into too much detail, but just to say that, you know, India has one of the largest urban populations. So clearly, if we're trying to address the global housing crisis, the Indian housing crisis has to be a big part of that. The World Cities Report, for those who do not know, we launch this report every 2 years. And every 2 years, we try to look at one key defining thematic area related to urbanization and urban planning. We had one on climate change, for example, and this year's in 2026 looks at the global housing crisis. We both try to look at sort of the problem, the scale, the complexity, the drivers, etc., but then also try to provide some practical evidence-based solutions that countries and other stakeholders can implement. So I invite you also to download it, to read it, because it's quite thick, so I can only touch upon so much. We launched it in May. It was a very collaborative effort with many experts involved, both within Habitat but also outside. So we truly hope this reflects a state of the art where we are with the global housing crisis. This is the broad overview of the report. I won't go into detail on this, but I invite you to read it. We have sort of 2 chapters setting up the context, 5 on sort of really the substance of it, and a sort of 2 chapters that sort of summarize and close some of the issues. But I want to get to some of the key facts and findings we had, and some of the broader ideas around framing we had of the report. So 3.4 billion people are affected by some form of housing inadequacy. You may have seen actually quite a few numbers being thrown around, sometimes 3 billion, sometimes 2.8. Actually, it's quite difficult to measure housing inadequacy. And we can see that actually there's a whole bunch of range of different measures that different organizations and governments use. 3.4 billion figure also reflects rural inadequacy, which is often left out. So perhaps that is something also you want to look at with housing. That is, of course, not as an urban problem, but actually in India, especially, it's also very much a rural problem. We know that by 2050, around 2 billion people will be added to cities. So that adds enormous extra pressure on cities to deliver housing. The report includes some estimates of housing shortages. This is just one measure of the global housing problem, but it indicates the scale that we're facing. And we see that things are getting worse, right? That's very clear. In 2010, we had 201 million units still lacking, and that has gone up to 268 by 2023. So regardless of the precise numbers, things are getting worse, and that's quite clear. Unaffordability is a big problem. 44% of households spend more than 30% of their income on rent, which doesn't leave much money left for other essential services, including education, including healthcare, especially for those countries that don't have a very strong welfare system, right, where people have to pay for these services. We see urban displacements actually reaching a number that has not been so high since almost 2 decades, and these people face, one of the most acute housing shortages, where they have absolutely no house at all. We see that the rates for informal settlement in slums is still going up in absolute numbers, 1.16 in 2023. And this is projected to keep increasing. It applies to the Indian context too. And we see a lot of housing production is informal, more than 80% in some context, and India is probably up there with quite a high rate as well. The connection between housing and climate, very critical, and we see that many homes are being affected by and destroyed by climate change. We see again that many people are not able to access finance to purchase their homes, and only 25%, 1 in 4 of applicants is eligible for loans. And India has again quite an average one in that bracket in terms of the figures. And we see that there's a huge need for investment for housing to close not only the supply gap, but also all the other elements related to habitat, including services, public transport, so forth. So having given sort of some of the big numbers to you, I wanted to dive in a bit more actually around some of the sort of framing we had around the global housing crisis. And when we started working on this report, those 3 words in the title are really sort of the key summary to us. We realized that this crisis for the first time is very much global. This is no longer an issue that is simply faced by developing countries, Africa, Asia, etc., but that countries in the global north are facing acute problems as well. And this is a global issue, but it's at the same time also offering some opportunities where perhaps we can learn from each other, right? And I think that goes in both ways. I think the developed world can learn from countries like India, where housing is being addressed through means that are often dismissed or ignored in the global north, and vice versa. India can learn a lot from how countries in the global north have addressed or are addressing the housing crisis, including, for example, social housing programs, etc. Then the second bit around housing, we really had a big discussion about what that really means. Like I said, extending it to habitat. Within the UN, we have a formal framework called the Dimensions of Adequate Housing. This is a UN-adopted resolution framework around what does adequate housing really mean, right? It talks about affordability, but it also talks about location, about accessibility. And this was an important dimension for us to make sure that we're not just looking at affordable housing, which is often what the discussion tends to focus on, but that to achieve adequate housing for all, there's many dimensions involved. And then finally, we reflected a lot on the idea of crisis. is this truly a crisis, or is this really a structural problem that has persisted for decades? And I think through the report, you'll actually find that it's both, really, that we are having to deal with a structural issue, including people living in slum conditions, but that there's also aspects to it that demonstrate that things are getting worse within sort of the last 10 years. And this really then is culminating into a crisis for many people that were somehow able to manage before, but are now sort of really reaching their tipping point. The way that this report looks at the housing crisis looks at these sort of 5 interlinked and mutually reinforcing challenges. So we recognize that unaffordability is a key dimension of this housing crisis, but that it interacts with a whole lot of other crises that are happening simultaneously. One of them is displacement and loss of housing. So that means not only refugees and internal displaced people, IDPs, but also people that are the victim of evictions, or, for example, in a global north context, gentrification. People are being pushed out of houses, and this is a huge problem, and it often affects those that are already on the margins. Then we see this issue of informality as a key part of the housing crisis. And the way we have framed it here is quite distinct, perhaps, from what we've done in the past, where informality itself was seen as the problem. The report now looks at the problem being more around how governments and other stakeholders have actually failed to sort of engage properly with informality, with informal housing production, but also informal livelihoods and other means of accessing land, for example. And that to integrate informality is really the key challenge here, rather than try to eliminate it. Then we see the climate crisis as one of those key ones that intersects with housing. And I'll speak more to that. And then finally, the idea that housing construction, housing issues have also been framed around issues of supply and demand, etc. But that without those other issues of livability, of inclusivity, you only end up producing housing for an elite group, and producing housing in a segregated way that leaves many people behind. And you can see the diagram here that there's lots of issues at the intersection of these, which I think is important for us also as an organization, that in order to address this, we can't just work within our own housing discipline. We need to work across government departments and across systems to address this. So I'm just going to take you through some of the main findings. We already said 2 billion people added in cities, so there's a huge pressure, and the number of units required is quite high. I pulled out the figures for India. According to our methodology in 2020, around 20 million of that was the shortage in India, which we use a sort of globally standardized methodology for. So it, of course, may vary from specific numbers that are there at the country level. But we also emphasize very much in the report that this issue of units is really just to signal the scale of the crisis. And addressing the crisis is about much more than by supplying units alone. And there's a need to strengthen all the other systems around housing and around just housing units. Then we look at affordability. And as you can see in the graph here on the right, this is some of the data we collected. You can see that it's getting worse pretty much in every region. In some regions, it's staying sort of flat. But as you can see in the case of India, Central and Southern Asia, things are getting worse. India is sort of on the average here. So on average, an Indian household spends around between 11.4 and 9.2 times their annual income to buy a house. That's very, very high historically. And it means that housing is basically impossible to access to the majority of people, especially young people. And I think what we've seen also over recent weeks in India partly speaks to that there's also a generational component to the lack of being able to access housing. And we see that around 44% of households spend over 30% of their income on rent, which is a problem, especially in a country like India, where people actually often prioritize spending on education for their children, spending on healthcare for their elderly, and housing actually is not their top priority when it comes to spending. But yet it takes up such a big part of what people earn. Then I just pulled out some issues of the housing affordability in Indian context, and we see that the demand is mostly in EWS and LIG segments. But we also see that developers have actually tended to move away from delivering for these groups and primarily producing housing for mid and high-end units. And I think this is probably one of the challenges that NIUA wants to look at also. But then in the Indian context, we also see a huge amount of informal labor in the housing sector. 16% of labor force is actually working in the construction sector, and a large part of that is housing. But then if you look at the share between formal and informal jobs, you see that the majority of jobs that are created are informal. So how can you incorporate these industries and these people in a way that provides some security to them, but also provides livelihood, and then ultimately also helps deliver housing on a larger scale. We see actually in the Indian context that housing construction costs are less of an issue than, for example, in Africa, where this is actually one of the key issues. But we see actually in the Indian context there's quite big economies of scale, right, in terms of core building materials. So in terms of focusing on affordability, that's probably perhaps where you don't want to look. What we do see is that there's, especially in India, there's an issue with land availability. And that would be something that I think needs to be a priority in trying to make housing affordable in the Indian context. As Habitat, we spend a great deal of time thinking about people who have, are the most vulnerable, and housing displacement is a key issue for us. We see that the numbers are increasing. As you can see, since 2014, they've only gone up. We now have 123 million people that are forcibly displaced. And these are people at the bottom of the scale that need the most help. We also see that evictions actually are taking up a huge number that are going to be added to this. Over 64 million people over the last 2 decades, many of which also in the Indian context. So even though this is an issue perhaps that's perceived as not being very applicable to the Indian context, there's still quite significant numbers. Up to 4 million people have been internally displaced in the Indian context. But of course, it also affects neighboring countries in India. I'm thinking about Myanmar, about Pakistan, that also have significant populations of IDPs. So I think this is also something to reflect on for the Indian context around how it can address this issue. Then I wanted to spend a little bit more time on the issue of informality, which I think is a very prevalent issue in the Indian context. And the way that the report frames informality is that we need to move away from this idea that informality is something that is bad and needs to be got rid of, but rather understand it as something that is a logical response by people in the face of the housing challenges we face. And we've seen a lot of eviction in the past. What we try to encourage through this report is for governments and other stakeholders to actually leverage housing, to leverage informality, to address the housing crisis, to look at informal labor, informal housing practices, informal land management, informal infrastructure production. And rather than dismissing this out of hand and formalizing it, often losing some of the sort of inherent flexibility, how can these informal practices be supported, either through regulation, through funding, etc., so that they can actually help scale? Because in the end context, the majority of housing production is still informal, and it is impossible to address the housing crisis without seriously taking a look at this, not only in terms of how this can be formalized, but how it actually can be leveraged to address some of those key other components of the housing, including affordability. And we see a mixed picture in India. The numbers here are again from some of the data we've been collecting for a long time. 40.8% of our population lives in informal settlements. And the picture here is similar as the global context. So we see that absolute numbers of people living in informal settlements are still increasing, while the percentage is going down. So there's both a positive element to this, but also one of a very pressing element where the need is still quite big. We see that India has actually developed quite a lot of policy around this. So I think there's actually quite a lot of momentum and a lot of good practices in the Indian context to engage with this. And a lot of good examples on the ground, including Ahmedabad, but many others, where you see sort of community-led approaches to addressing housing. Yet at the same time, we see that, for example, eviction practices are still quite commonplace in the Indian context, between 200 and 300,000 people annually in India. So a mixed picture. And I think there's also many positives to learn from, including the Avara project in Pune, which we featured in the report, which is one of the best practices in terms of how in situ upgrading of informal settlements can happen, led by civil society, engage residents in a participatory manner, fostering incremental house-by-house upgrading, retaining existing street layouts and infrastructure, respecting residents' social networks, and supporting livelihoods. Now we turn to climate, and I think, again, for India, this is a very, very pressing issue. The way we see it is that the housing crisis and the climate crisis are two of the big challenges we face, but that they intersect in a very big manner, right? We know that the housing sector is producing a lot of emissions, and India, in fact, has one of the largest, simply by the sheer size of its population. But we also know that housing, and especially informal settlements, are also very vulnerable to climate change. So we have to somehow figure out how to address both sides of the problem, how to mitigate emissions, but also how to improve the resilience of cities, housing, and informal settlements in particular, to be able to withstand some of the pressures of climate change. And housing is a very powerful entry point for that. There's lots of stuff that can be done to housing, with housing, to address climate, both in terms of retrofitting, but also in terms of new housing that is being built. For example, using public transport to reduce car emissions. So this is quite an important lever for us to address the housing crisis. The final domain that we looked at is this idea of inclusion and making housing work not just by itself, but in connection to the city. And a big thing that we've seen over the decades, but it's actually increasing, is that cities are still expanding very rapidly, and lots of urban sprawl. From 1975 to 2025, urban areas expanded at nearly twice the rate of population growth. And this is putting a lot of pressure on cities, and not only in increased emissions, but also increased travel times. You lose a lot of the economic advantages of cities by putting people and services closely together. You realize a lot of economic benefits that are lost by increasing sprawl. And we just put here an example here on the right of one of the cities that we looked at. And actually, the main driver of urban sprawl is single family housing. And that's where the government can come in and put in place regulation that encourages higher density and mixed use housing to curb sprawl. It also shows that actually informal settlements and informal housing is not really part of the problem here, it's part of the solution. These are already quite dense mixed use environments. And the problem of sprawl is much more related to middle class housing at the edge of the city that we need to address. A key angle that we looked at to achieve inclusion for housing is to look at pro-poor housing approaches. And actually, you see in India that there's a lot of initiatives already that try to promote housing programs for urban poor. But on the whole, we see the situation is stark. Out of the cities we surveyed, only 90% have strong civil society participation. I don't know what the numbers look for in India, but I'm sure there's room to improve as well. And in the report, we advocate for an approach that directly involves people in the design and implementation of housing, and not just treating them as beneficiaries, but to involve them and actually give them power to design their own communities, have community-led approaches. And there's a number of things that governments can do to achieve that, including some of the examples on the right: reserved seats, dedicated budgets, and legal frameworks that protect vulnerable communities. Then finally, the issue of finance. It is very, very difficult for people to access finance for housing, for mortgage. And we see that's also the case in India. You see here on the right the percentage of households that are actually able to obtain a housing loan. And globally, the rates are only around 25%. In India, sort of in the ballpark of that. It's an average player, globally speaking, in terms of access to mortgages. And this is a key issue. And the report tries to articulate what can be done to make housing more accessible and identifies land as one of the key instruments that can allow people to access loans, but also help with the affordability. So there's a number of examples in the report on de-risking instruments, including the example of Bhubaneswar. That was a very successful case study in making land available for the urban poor. I think I'm about at the end of my time. I'm looking at the clock. There's a number of broader recommendations we have around the social function of housing, balancing the need to invest in housing, but also protect it as a social good, having multi-stakeholder approaches, diversifying tenure, and in general, building better data systems to understand the scale and the drivers of the problem we're facing. But I hope this was successful in sort of sketching out a broad picture of the global housing crisis. I think I'm going to hand it over back to you, Nilesh, I think. Happy to respond to any questions, and thanks again for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Matthias. Just going to make a quick intervention. First of all, want to start by congratulating NIUA and MOA on this absolutely excellent initiative for setting up this center. Couldn't have come at a better time because there's very clearly global convergence around the realization that housing is an important entry point to think about larger urban issues around livability, economic stability, climate resilience, and so on and so forth. In India too, as a India country team, we hope to focus on housing as a major programmatic priority going forward. And just want to highlight four important elements which I think are important for India, and where I'm upfront as a country office also kind of offering our support going forward on how we want to think about it. But four areas where I think the report makes a very strong kind of indication for us, and in India too, I find a lot of resonance. One is around housing affordability itself, but not just in terms of house pricing, but looking at different formats, looking at rental housing, looking at small format, very, very short tenure housing systems, which may speak to the fact that you now have circular workers coming into the city. So, the housing needs have also kind of become very, very different. And I think just looking at the entire spectrum of housing in terms of tenures, in terms of pricing, in terms of rental and other formats would be very, very useful. And how do we unpack that? The second is around resilient housing. I think housing as a key instrument towards building human security and resilience remains highly unexplored. And it's an area where I think a lot of work in India also can happen. Also looking at the GHG emission aspect of housing, given that it's one of the major contributors. The third aspect is around, really thinking about moving beyond houses to thinking about these areas as homes for the poor, because there is an entire socio-economic dimension to urban poor housing. Houses can double up as workspaces. Community networks are strengthened through the way housing network kind of gets physically planned and executed. So there is an entire people aspect to housing, which I think requires a lot of thinking and policy work. And the last is, of course, the entire housing becoming the central pivot for thinking through planning systems, whether it is around public transport design, around transit-oriented development, around land management, peri-urban growth, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot which can be kind of looked at through housing as an entry point. And just want to kind of end with saying that Habitat India and globally would be very, very happy to support NIUA and MOA going forward, whether it is capacity building work, policy research work, or even kind of mobilizing global expertise of Habitat and the global networks to kind of scale up some of the conversations in the global south and globally. Thank you. Thank you so much. Hand it over back to Debarpita, I guess. Debarpita?
Yeah, thank you. Am I audible, Nilesh?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Shubhagata, Matthias, and Nilesh for that comprehensive presentation and also bringing together the global evidence and its relevance to the Indian context. The report really provides us an important foundation for the discussion which we are having today. And the next question naturally is how these global insights relate to India's own experience of addressing the affordable housing challenge. And that brings us to the next session, which will focus on India's experience in affordable housing and policy reforms, particularly through the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Housing for All program. India has, over the last decade, undertaken significant efforts to address the urban housing challenge through the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban Program, or PMAYU. The experience of PMAYU and PMAYU 2.0 provides us an important basis for reflecting on how India's approach to affordable housing has evolved, what lessons have emerged from implementation, and what the next generation of housing policy may need to address. It is now my privilege to invite the chair of today's webinar, Sri Kuldeep Narayanji. Sri Narayan is Joint Secretary and Mission Director of the Housing for All Mission at the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. I now invite Sri Narayan to share his perspective on India's experience with PMAYU and the evolution of the urban housing policy. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Devilina. Am I audible?
You are.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. And before I start my presentation or talk, I'll slightly use some slides while I speak. But before that, let me first thank UN Habitat for highlighting the findings of World Cities report, which is very timely about talking about housing as a crisis. Because housing as a crisis, when we say, there are two aspects we need to think about: housing as a physical feature, having a roof over your head; two, housing as a concept which provides dignity to the family, where they can work, they can then aspire for better being. And when we so when we think about housing as a physical construct and housing as a social construct, that brings us to something which is important. Let's not take housing as a just roof or something, but its place in habitat and as a launch pad so that the family can get integrated into the society at large. And when we see that, although number of uh, population which is living in slums may be lower, but when you see adequate housing, the percentage not having adequate housing is actually higher. That is something we have to keep in mind because of having different data sets, what is the percentage and what is not. And seeing this as a problem, let me share some slides how India perceives it, how India has started working for adequate housing. I would call it, although Vambe and other schemes were there in India, but real concerted effort, dedicated effort started with JNURM, which got amplified in when PM Awas Yojana Urban was launched. that is Prime Minister's housing program, and our experience of implementing Rajiv Awas Yojana and PM Awas Yojana for last 12 years gives us a lot of insights, and I'm sure some of the best practices, some of the practices, three representatives from states would be sharing. So let me give you some broad national perspective where we are, what we are thinking. I think I'll be able to show my slides. Let me try to share. कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं जानी चाहिए हाँ ओके it's visual, right? So this is a slide which almost all of us have seen, almost all of us understand, but the broad point that I would like to highlight here is India is going to see as much urbanization, as much increase in urban population more than last century, whole century saw. So our urban population from going by various estimates is going to be around 850 million to 900 million by 2050, from approximately 50 million of 2020 which was estimated. So we have to construct houses, address the demand that will come up in next few years, and also catch up where adequate housing is not there. This we all are aware. This is why I mentioned in the beginning that adequate housing, adequate space is the key term, key criteria, not only having only the physical space where a family is living, which may be insufficient, which may lack some basic services. So that is something we'll have to keep in mind. And if we think from this point of view, I'm happy that I think Mathis mentioned instead of thinking of housing, let's think about habitat. When we our understanding in the ministry is very clear about it. You cannot think about housing, even if it is adequate, affordable, when you devoid it, when you disconnect it from urban planning and urban transport, public transport. Housing, urban planning and public transport have to be visualized together, have to be planned together, ensuring that people remain at the center. So housing has to be adequate, certainly, affordable, certainly, and also well located. If it is not well located, people may not like to go for such housing, and they may remain in slums, or they may choose substandard housing if it is not well located, if it is not provided for, connected with good transport. So because affordability of house is not the only thing. In fact, I would always suggest, let's calculate the affordability of house by adding affordability as well as public cost of transport to your places of employment or places of social gathering or educational institution or health institution. So if we have to do that, we have to provide land as part of urban planning to affordable housing. That is important part. So that these three tripods are very integral to a good balanced habitat development. And let me also take you through some of the recurring themes what we see in last 15 years of housing reports. One, urbanization is irreversible. We all understand, we have taken all the speakers before me also pointed it out. Across the world it is happening, and certainly in India it is happening as a much higher rate. In fact, the next assessment says that more urban population will be added, not in percentage but by orders of magnitude, in South Asia, India and Africa in next 25 years. Everywhere else it may get reduced, but these are the places where it is going to get higher. And most of housing shortage is in EWS LIG sector, no doubt about it. Third, land cost is the core constraint. Actually, land security of tenure, that is something which drives the cost of housing as well as which drives unavailability of housing. So affordability and unavailability both are driven because of land. Then comes something which is important for us, that rental housing as a social endeavor, as a government endeavor, has been neglected for quite some time in the light of continuous pressure on ownership model of housing. So be it social housing, be it industrial worker housing, be it employee housing, be it anything, but a lot of people do not require or do not intend or cannot afford to have ownership in the first place. So rental housing should also be adequate in the society, and it should not be informal, it should be formal rental housing. And that brings us to that vacancy paradox. Close to 10 million, more than 10 million, in fact 11 million houses were vacant in 2011 census. We are expecting in 2025, that is 27 data that will come for the latest census, that will also have similar numbers. So that is something we have to really address, and ministry is very much conscious of this fact. How do we solve this issue? And the last one would be addressing the informal settlements. That's a quite complicated one. Upgradation of slums versus relocation or in situ resettlement, that is something various models are continued in India, but to a limited success, I would say. So if we have to address holistically this demand, we have to have all the partners addressed, all the types of housing also addressed, individual house construction, government housing schemes, private developers get good incentives, industrial worker housing, rental housing for working women or students or migrant workers, so that it's a balanced development and we do not get into one side of I would say one-sided housing focus we are not attracted to. That is very important here. So considering this, our PMAY, that is Housing for All mission, is working starting from 2015 with a very basic architecture, basic vision, that every family should have access to pakka all-weather houses with all basic amenities. Various verticals are there. We call it kind of cafeteria approach, because India being a big country, there are smaller cities, there are bigger cities, there are metros. So one size does not fit all, and we provide government viability gap funding, nudge to beneficiaries and to state governments, urban local bodies, so that more and more houses are constructed or acquired by beneficiaries. As on date, I would say, just to tell you one aspect, when I said in the beginning that NIUA was probably the first concerted effort, we also need to compare that India has in last 20 years, 22 years, has come a long way. In first 10 years, under NIUA, close to 12 lakh houses, 13 lakh houses were sanctioned. And now in last 10 years, 11 years, almost 9 times, 10 times houses have been sanctioned. Similarly, for completion from 8 lakhs to more than 99 lakhs, and in fact this week we crossed 10 million houses completion out of more than 1.27 lakh houses sanctioned. So that is something in first 10 years, if we achieved X, almost in next 10 years we have achieved 10X, and as the target goes by, in next 5 years we have to target another 10 million houses. So that is something we are targeting, but that is not going to be sufficient. Despite the fact that close to 3 million slum dwellers, 50 lakh backward community beneficiaries, 2.7 million SC/ST beneficiaries, more than 2 million minority beneficiaries, everyone is taken care of, but still that is not sufficient. That is the broad point I am putting. we use technology, we use monitoring at a central level, state level, ULB level, everyone having the same uh, kind of rather same single source of truth, single source of database to access for monitoring, but it is not going to solve unless we address other things like rental housing that we started working in 2020. In 24 we improved it, we provided for it with better targeting and more of viability gap funding. Now we are working for a specialized scheme for industrial workers. We also uh, are targeting more and more rental housing for maybe laborers, building construction workers, hospitality industry, students, manufacturing industries, even some long-term tourist visitors, everyone we are targeting here. And just to show you some photographs, what has been achieved in different places, maybe for industrial workers, maybe for normal working women, lot of such houses are being constructed, close to 1 million in rental housing. But for next 5 years we are targeting approximately 2 to 3 million rental housing. Out of the 10 million that we will be constructing, more than 2 million will be having for rental housing. For this we are also supporting technology submission to promote innovative and sustainable construction practices. That I will skip the slides because that is not important, so to say. It's a data, but just to drive home the point, we want to support innovative construction technologies across India, and for that purpose we launched lighthouse projects where number of houses is not important, but a lot of engineers, engineering students, architecture students are taken to these places to know how the construction happens, how these buildings can be constructed in a fast manner in uh, using sustainable technologies. So these are some of the photos of where these are being constructed, and all of these are actual photos, none of these are plans. Then there are smaller demonstration housing projects, again sustainable innovative technologies of 40 houses in a unit, so that in smaller cities these can be shown to local engineers, local people who want to get their houses constructed, what are the possible technologies. If we see all this as a number, we have achieved a lot. More than 10 million houses constructed, different type, multi-story apartment complexes, single family dwelling units, having supported vernacular architecture, because there is a lot of variety here. But despite the fact, excuse me, दूसरे कॉल पे हूँ, कॉल करता हूँ. We also have people who these are actual photos where they were living earlier and now where they are living, same places before and after the having the schemes, same. This is something from Andhra Pradesh, but all this could not have been possible through central government. In fact, I would like to highlight three places: Kerala, Gujarat and Odisha, where although there are many states which have done their own innovations, but what I am highlighting is something, only 3 states where innovation has been done by dovetailing the scheme, central scheme, with the local missions, and also innovating how the financing is done. I am sure when our speaker from Kerala speaks, she will talk about it. So I am not going into it, but states have done their innovations. Gujarat has done a lot of innovation in their town planning schemes, in their AHP, how private developers have been roped in for slum redevelopment using TDRs and land development rights, and all that is something when all pillars of government, be it central, state and ULB, they come together, they work in sync, how the magic happens, it is an example. But going forward, I would say When we launched PMAY 2.0, I would like to highlight just 2-3 more things. We actually revamped PMAY 1 because after completing close to 10 million houses and targeting another 10 million in next 5 years, it cannot be business as usual. So there would be 3-4 things which we have changed. We want to promote private investment in affordable housing. Government only investment is not going to help. So having affordable housing policy by the state is something must for next few years. That should contain key reforms to promote private investment. Then we are already having we are providing boost to innovative construction technologies through TIG, providing focus on rental housing vertical I already talked about, and two more things, because one of the highlights that we see from Global Cities report that is important, there's those who need the housing loans where affordability hits the most, they are outside mostly from formal loan ecosystem. So how do we solve that? By providing affordable home loan product from banks and housing finance companies through our Department of Financial Services, and restructuring credit risk guarantee fund to support such loans which are taken by PMAY beneficiaries. If you ask me what is something that separates, what that highlights about PMAY 2.0 from the previous version PMAY 1, I would call three things: affordable housing policy containing key reforms to promote private investment; two, affordable home loan ecosystem promotion for people working in informal sector; and providing restructured credit risk guarantee fund so that such loans are uh, provided credit guarantee, and they are so banks and housing finance companies find it comfortable to give loans to EWS and LIG segment. That is what we have done. There are reforms taking place for this thing, but let me tell you something that recently we had. Yesterday, in fact, we had a full day national conference of state and urban local bodies, mostly million plus cities and financial institutions, housing finance companies. Niti Aayog along with MOHUA, we gave a report in 2025 December. What are the practical best practices, practical pathways, and to promote affordable housing building upon success of PMAY? So there are four such verticals: how to increase land supply, how to increase housing stock, how to promote access to capital, and promote rental housing. That is a good reading, in fact, for anyone who is interested. We have a copy on our website. It's a freely available. Anyone can read it. And two things what I highlighted: home loans, very simple thing. No salary slip, no income tax return, but on basis of something, no income tax return, no salary slip, but on basis of minimal or no documented income, on basis of digital footprints of banking and other economic activities, a person can be appraised about his uh, loanability. And to provide support for that, there it is credit risk guarantee fund. So that is something in India we are doing a lot of activities. I would, if you ask me, we are doing a lot of things, and in fact there are so many things happening at the same time. Everyone has to keep pace to understand what the other arm of government is doing, what other states are doing, and that is why such organizing such conferences are very much useful, so that all of us remain at the same page and we realize it is not only important to promote affordable housing, it is also important to keep reviewing where we are heading, how much we are falling short, and what are the corrective steps that can be taken. So from my point of view, this is something, a short point I have tried to put in, although I took a slightly more time than I had intended, and Kundu madam has permitted, but I think that will give us a good vantage point from ministry's point of view. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for sharing those insights and also for bringing the national perspective into today's discussion. What emerges from the discussion so far is that addressing the housing challenge requires much more than housing programs alone. It requires an enabling ecosystem involving land, planning, infrastructure, finance, regulations, and as well as the institutional capacity. Many of these issues are ultimately experienced and innovated upon at the state and city levels. That brings us to the next session on state best practices. We will now move from the national level to the state level, where many of the policy approaches and implementation models around affordable housing are being developed and tested. The objective of this session is not simply to showcase individual programs, but to understand the policy, regulatory, planning, and institutional approaches adopted by different states and the lessons that these experiences may offer to others. We are particularly pleased to hear from Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, and Kerala, three states with very different institutional and development contexts. Let me begin with Tamil Nadu. I am really pleased to invite Ms. K. Ramana Saraswati, Managing Director, Tamil Nadu Urban Habitat Development Board, Government of Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu has considerable experience in addressing urban housing and habitat challenges. Yesterday, as sir, you were mentioning, I think Tamil Nadu has lots to offer to the other states and cities in terms of innovations in both rental housing as well as the other aspects of housing. Madam, I would now particularly request you to share your perspective on Tamil Nadu's experience in delivering affordable housing and improving housing and habitat conditions for vulnerable households, as well as the institutional mechanisms that have supported these efforts. Over to you, madam.
Good evening, all. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Loud and clear.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Just I'll start sharing my presentation.
Madam, do we run your presentation? We have a time.
Yeah, just a minute, ma'am. I'm just trying to share it.
Okay, sure, sure.
Yeah, I think now it is visible.
Yes.
Thank you for this opportunity for giving me and the state of Tamil Nadu to present in this forum. I personally thank Kuldeep sir for this opportunity. Yesterday, though, we had mind-blowing sessions from the morning, and we had different other features that we can adopt, learn from the other states of the country also. So I was personally, I thank personally sir for giving me this opportunity today to share our state's performance in this forum. Thank you, ma'am, and thank you all the other colleagues for giving me this opportunity. To share the Tamil Nadu experience in addressing the challenges to afford an adequate urban housing. Over a period of 5 decades, we have an institutional experience in dealing with the housing needs of the urban poor. Our experience have evolved considerably from slum clearance and housing provision to an integrated habitat development. Today, I like to share not only our achievements, but also some of the lessons and challenges and approaches that may be relevant to the wider global housing conversation. To say, it is about creating a secure, dignified, and sustainable habitat creation. Um, so this to say, begin with the global context, just about the stats. This all of us are aware of. It is about the scale of housing challenges, which we have around 3.54 billion people globally lack secure and safe, adequate housing. More than 1.1 billion people live in informal settlements and slums and often facing overcrowding and inadequate infrastructure. The global housing shortage has also continued to increase. At the same time, we have the climatic change in creating a new dimension to the housing challenge, with the millions of homes increasingly exposed to climate related hazards. So therefore, housing today has become not only a simple question of quantity, but also a question of quality that we provide. So it also gives the question of adequacy, affordability, location, tenure of security, resilience, climatic resilience, and access to other services like roads, schools, hospitals, everything put together. So this is why housing has an implication across multiple sustainable development goals, as UN has already given us. So the role of government remains particularly important in land, finance, infrastructure, regulation, and creating an enabling institutional framework. So when we see about the institutional framework and the answering why housing matters to us, this housing is not only a platform where we have a roof to live in, but it also gives scope for development on whole for one single family or per se an individual. So to address a safe house with water and sanitation, it directly contributes to a better health. Then stable address helps children remain connected to the schools. Then secure housing improves access to employment, credit, and formal economy, which provides the economical growth of the country. Most importantly, the uh, secure tenure provides dignity and protection from displacement and exploitation generally. So when we talk about affordable housing, we should really be talking about the human development through housing. This next brings
request, can you please put your presentation slideshow mode?
Since okay, I'll put it. It may be a little fast when I'm talking. Yeah. Is it okay now?
Yes, ma'am. Very much. Thank you.
So this brings to the Tamil Nadu context now with the evolution of 50 years of institutional journey. Starting from 71, we have the Tamil Nadu Slum Clearance Board, which was established and dedicated for the institution for slum clearance. Then initially focus was largely on the clearance and provision of tenements. Over time, approach changed, including plotted development, then secure tenure and infrastructure provision. Subsequently, PMAY climate-related resettlement brought new dimension to the work. In 2021, the institution was named as Tamil Nadu Urban Habitat Development Board. The change in the name itself reflects the change in the fundamental philosophy. We are no longer dealing only with the slums or houses. We are also dealing with the urban habitats and communities. So this institutional evolution is perhaps one of the most important lesson that we have learned. So to explain the Tamil Nadu housing ecosystem, it is not only the urban habitat that is providing housing to the urban poor. We have the other verticals in our department, which are like town and country planning, dealing with the statutory planning, Chennai Metropolitan Development Agency, which focuses on metropolitan planning. Then the Urban Habitat Development Board, focusing on housing for the urban poor. Then the Housing Board, which gives the middle income housing as well as the other income groups. Then we have the cooperative housing, RCS housing cooperative societies, dealing with the housing societies. Then we have one unique feature of KUMTA, which regulates the transport dimension into the integrated metropolitan area. So then next is this institutional ecosystem allows a different aspect of urban development to be brought together, and this gives us the integrated housing approach. So we have 4 to 5 options of integrated housing approach, where one is the in situ settlement, where we have a preferably minimizes displacement. The next one is the integrated townships, where the full infrastructure it is a high risk location or banned location where we cannot proliferate the population there. Then comes the beneficiary-led constructions, where families already own land and they build their own houses there, for which we have the subsidies given. Then the existing dilapidated housing may be reconstructed with the better design and higher FSI. So, but housing alone is not the solution for this. We have the maintenance of these housing units, as well as some technology and innovation involved, to give a better housing approach to all the population here, urban population. And least to mention, we have the economic empowerment given to the residents of these tenements, where we give skill development and employment support to them. So over the period of like from 1970 to 2025, we have given about 5.62 lakh tenements, developed and allotted to more than 1.31 lakh plots. This continues to maintain around 2.25 lakh tenements. Talking about the housing, the main factor is the climate resilient and sustainable housing. In Tamil Nadu, particularly, we have the coastal exposure, floods, cyclones, heat as well. So to incorporate resilience at the design stage itself, we have now during the design phase itself, we have the material management for a better thermal performance and faster construction. Building orientation and envelope designs are considered for thermal comfort. Wind analysis to help improve natural ventilation, and plinth levels are determined with reference to the flood levels. So since last decade, we are overexposed to floods. So now we are having in that area also, we have people concentrating during the design phase itself. So accessibility for persons with disabilities, this has been incorporated as a mandate even in our act to provide provision for the accessibility of the differently abled people. And fire tender access and emergency circulation, this is one of the main feature where the disaster management and mitigation has come into effect. So considering all this, the house which is affordable but vulnerable to climate risks is not truly affordable in a long term. So considering this, we are taking in our design phase itself this climatic resilient sustainable houses. So talking about the affordability, then comes the technology and the innovation. So as earlier in our presentation itself, it was mentioned that the lighthouse project that was sanctioned, we have been considered for the prefab project, one of the 6 projects that were sanctioned by Government of India. So in the same way, we were open to, sorry, I'm really sorry. So we were really open to technology and innovation. That's why we had come forward experimenting with monolithic concrete, prefab concrete systems, as well as we are trying to implement the climatic resilient features in our buildings. So it is to take control of the quality, the time of implementation, as well as the cost effectiveness, durability of such housing units, whatever we are doing. So to mention about the lighthouse project Perumbakam, we have around 1,152 tenements, each with 413 square feet, and the project cost is 116.27 crores. But the emphasis here really goes to the not only to the construction technology, but also the social instruments that have been included with us. We have created a full complete neighborhood with Anganwadi, library, then milk booth, retail shops, such kind of facilities like including sewage treatment plant and electrical infrastructure. Everything has been provided there. So not only focusing simply on building blocks, but on creating a functioning neighborhood from the beginning itself. So this is one of the important principles for all affordable housing programs, where technology accelerates the creation of a better environment, better communities, and not only expediting the construction of buildings. Next is the Kannagi Nagar settlement. We would say this is a kind of resettlement to neighborhood. This is one of the concept that was created. It is one of the most Chennai's largest resettlement location, with around 23,704 tenements and more than 95,000 residents are there. So the initial experience, what we had highlighted was the several challenges associated with that was the peripheral location. So to this, there was no adequate access to schools, healthcare, transport, and employment, which resulted in social isolation. So now this physical isolation or a relocation was only part of rehabilitation. So for this, we had to improve the infrastructure, and redevelopment efforts were put in to move the settlement towards a more integrated neighborhood. So the key lesson from this was that should not measure success simply by the number of settlements we have created, but with the uh, with the accessible amenities that we have provided to the relocated houses and the families for their better living. So these are the voice of changes. Now we have one of our residents from that Kannagi Nagar being part of the winning gold medal team in Asian youth team in 2025. So this we hold as a flag for the community development activities that was taken up by our department in that neighborhood. So this livelihood resource center provides like training, mentoring, and market linkages. We have helped the self-help groups to identify their market, and we also provide timely skill development programs further for them to improve their household income, and also bring them to a different participation in their work also. So this and youth have been encouraged to participate in sports. We have been providing coaches for different sports activities, by way of which young minds are directed towards constructive sources, and so that they have their future also built in a better way. So these interventions show that impact of housing becomes much stronger when residents are given opportunities to improve their lifestyle as well as their economic conditions. Therefore, this transition we are trying to achieve is from beneficiaries to empowerment of citizens. We want that conversion to be seen. To bring this conversion, we need some institutional policies and reforms to be given. So for that, delivering housing at a scale that we require some institutional reforms alongside physical construction. Same way, Kuldeep sir has been mentioning about the act reforms that we have to take part. Same way, the state of Tamil Nadu is also having the act revised, and it is under consideration at a government level. It is under preparation. Soon we'll be implementing the revised act and rules. The same as per the directions, we are also happy to inform that we are part of this institutional reforms. So apart from that, institutional policies, we have our own small set of operational procedures which we followed to rehabilitate and develop the human resources in these tenement areas, so that they are taken care in a long term. We have encouraged formation of residential welfare associations, and so that they take care of the base minimal maintenance work of that area. And we are also exploring segmented housing options to respond to different levels of affordability. So at planning level itself, Tamil Nadu has undertaken reforms relating to integrated land use, thermal comfort, online payment, online permission. That's a single window planning permissions, and community-based O&M. This community-based O&M is from our RWA. To have all this in place, we need some strong financing partnerships. The major challenge what we are facing is financing. The scale of urban housing requirements cannot be met only by government budgets. So we have a blended financing model. So under the affordable housing, we have partnered with the Government of India. Then substantial state government support is there. Then we have the beneficiary contribution. Then apart from that, we have multilateral financing from the other government departments, or they participate with their assets, like contributing or they lease out their lands, or they transfer their land to Urban Habitat Board, so that we can build the tenements in that areas. So Tamil Nadu has now leveraged World Bank also and ADB partnerships for housing sector reforms and infrastructure. And we have the BLC led by PMA 2.0 model with the central and state assistance. So in a broader lesson, we can say that public finance should only be strategically used to leverage additional capital and increase the scale of affordable housing delivery. So next, as part of this multilateral financing agencies, we have the shelter fund to say. So one of the most important questions for the future is where are we going to get the funds from? So the state of Tamil Nadu has come up with an answer. The urban growth should help finance the housing needs generated by urban growth itself. So we have formed the shelter fund framework, which provides an example for this above. This can reduce the dependency on conventional budgetary support. We further look into TDR generated and redevelopment to be monetized. Then the shelter charges can be levied on certain private developers. Then additional FSI can improve the viability of affordable housing projects. This Tamil Nadu Shelter Fund also provides a mechanism to bring private and institutional capital into affordable rental and other social housing projects. So now with this, what are the lessons what Tamil Nadu has learned out of these 5 decades of housing is that first is housing is only a beginning. House must be accompanied by livelihoods, education, and services. Second is the community participation, which is very essential. Residents must participate in planning and maintenance. Third is the integration beats isolation. Housing must converge with infrastructure, transport, livelihoods, and other departments. Fourth is planning must be incremental and adaptive. Urban communities change and housing interventions must evolve with them. Fifth is the institutions must continuously reinvent themselves. Urban Habitat Board's own journey itself, from the slum clearance board to urban habitat, itself illustrates the evolution which is required. So perhaps this is the individual, this is more important than any individual scheme or technology, this self-evolution of the department. Further in for future, the vision what Tamil Nadu is having for urban housing is that we have a motto of housing for all poor by the year 2031. This is there are substantial projects in the pipeline for the housing interventions. More than and Government of India has been very supportive in sanctioning more number of houses under this scheme to the state of Tamil Nadu. We have around 1.38 lakh tenements approved under housing for, and more than 4.03 lakh houses have been approved under BLC. Then around 28,000 dilapidated tenements are identified for reconstruction. Then we have 54,000 affordable rental units planned in the urban workforce. These numbers demonstrate that only housing agenda is moving beyond a single program. It is becoming a continuum of interventions covering ownership, reconstruction, beneficiary-led housing, and rental housing. Further, in this announcement, years of announcement, our government has come up with one more special program, My Home, where it focuses and targets the metropolitan youth and family housing scheme. In urbanization is creating a growing population of young workers, migrants, students, first job entrants, single people who are employed outside their native, young families who may not immediately be able to purchase a house. So these kind of population is targeted for this My Home. So which is the rental housing scheme which we are proposing, and it seeks around to create 1 lakh housing over a period of 7 years through PPP based approach, where we will be participating either with the land or the departments will be coming up with their assets to share, and with private public partnership we are proposing this My Home initiative. So this will be having dormitories, studios, 1 BHK, 2 BHK apartments. So based on their income as well as based on their necessity, they will be allotted, and they can be, it is a ladder of units which can be, they can move up and down the ladder based on their requirement. This larger idea is to create a flexible and affordable, dignified rental housing market for urban workforce. So coming back to affordable housing, how we are scaling up in Tamil Nadu.
Could you within the next 1 minute, because
Yeah.
we have the speakers line.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So next one, the major strength what we are seeing is the institutional strength and the state commitment. So Tamil Nadu has not depended on one single housing model, but depending on the location and circumstances, we have institute development, integrated townships, reconstruction, and beneficiary-led approaches. So to strengthen this, the delivery, we have the more emphasis on technology and integrated habitat programs, wherein we bring the community development also, and we also foresee the blended finances from the other departments as well as other sources or private financing features we look into. So we have the innovative financial partners with us. For these innovative finances, we partnership and invest with our resources that are available, like monetizing the TDR, additional FSIs, and the land value capture, PPP, institutional investment. All these we are looking forward. And apart from that, we are trying to utilize the shelter fund experiences also. To summarize this, we would say the objective is to eliminate slums not merely by moving the people out of them, but to eliminate the conditions that the slums necessitated. Then from shelter to empowerment, we lead like over a 55-year journey we began with the objective of cleaning the shelter, clearing the slums to providing shelter. Housing must be connected to infrastructure, livelihood, education, mobility, climate resilience, and community participation. We believe in our experience to demonstrate the strong institutions, multiple housing instruments, community participation, innovative technology, and blended financing, which have collectively created more inclusive and resilient cities. So this is Tamil Nadu's experience that contributes to the most important global dialogue. And equally, we look forward to learn from the others, other cities as well as and the other countries. I thank every one of you for the patient hearing, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for very much for enlightening us on the various innovative measures on various fronts which have been taken up by your state. And at our center, at our Public Policy Center, we would also like to work with you very closely to understand what are the various pathways for these innovations which you have taken up, and we would like to learn from you and document these as case studies so that other states could emulate as they go ahead their journey towards Viksit Bharat. Now we turn to Gujarat. One of the important dimensions of affordable housing is its relationship with urban planning and land, including how cities plan for growth and how land and development instruments can facilitate housing. I am pleased to invite Mr. Harpal S. Dave, Additional Chief Town Planner, Town Planning and Valuation Department, Government of Gujarat. Harpalji, it would be very useful to hear about the role of urban planning and land-related instruments in enabling affordable housing and the lessons that Gujarat's experience may offer in integrating housing more effectively into the process of urban development. Over to you, sir.
Indeed. Thank you very much, madam. Thank you for the kind introduction. So in Gujarat, madam, as we are aware, we are using the TP scheme model quite widely with a great degree of success. And it has been useful for our state also for mobilizing land for the purpose of housing for the economically weaker section. And we have been using since many decades now. Another tool that we have, or another means by which we are ensuring the supply of urban land for the creation of affordable housing is by making provisions in the development plan. We have the residential affordable housing zone in the development plan prepared for the city of Ahmedabad by the Ahmedabad Urban Development Authority. And we have also come up with an innovative zoning technique known as overlay zone. So we have the residential housing, affordable residential housing overlay zone. That is quite an innovation, and it has served to a great degree. I'll just come to this. Can someone make it full screen so the pages can be turned more easily, the presentation? And kindly keep it to the title slide for now. And then I can, on my request, please, if you can turn the pages, turn the slides. And third tool that we have used, madam, is primarily for the redevelopment of slum areas in the city. We have been using, which even what the Joint Secretary Sir mentioned in his speech about the use of TDR, a transferable development right, as a tool for integrated in situ slum redevelopment, ISSR. And that has also served us very well. It has served in inviting private sector in helping us redevelop the slum areas. The city of Ahmedabad has now fortunately got many of its slum redeveloped, and where the affordable housing are now located. So Gujarat, as we are aware, we use the two tools quite well with the development plan, which is at the macro level for the entire city. What Delhi calls master plan, we call development plan for. So this is prepared for the entire city. And in order to implement the proposals of the development plan, we are using a tool for called known as TP scheme. This is a micro level planning tool. Generally, we take about 100 hectares. In some cases, more than 100 hectares also. There is no standard size for the TP scheme to be taken up. So about 100 hectares, 150 hectares, in some cases even 1000 hectares of area of TP scheme we are using. The generic name of TP scheme is land readjustment. It is a little different from land pooling, wherein the original land parcels lose their identity and the entire land is pooled and redistributed. But in TP scheme, the original land parcels are reconstituted. The geometry is improved. The road network is laid down, and the other amenities and land parcels for various use are demarcated. So next slide, please. I think, so this is the DP and TP model that we speak about. The DP is the macro level plan. The TP is the micro level plan. And the development plan, what we, as like any other development plan, we provide the land use zoning, the road network, the urban infrastructure, and the development control regulations, primarily the FSI, building height, ground coverage. Next, please. Next slide, please. In Ahmedabad, what we have done is we have identified the residential affordable housing zone, and also defined that slide with the. So this is the TP model that we were speaking about, the macro and the micro planning. And in the macro level planning, we identify various land use zones. What we have done is in the development plan of Ahmedabad, where various zones are demarcated. On the left-hand side in the legend, I've tried to highlight the residential affordable housing zone. It is on the western side of the city. It's a brown-colored patch. What we have also done is the residential affordable housing RAH overlay zone. Now, this overlay zone is something which is if the base zone, the overlay zone has been demarcated along the Sardar Patel Ring Road, SP Ring Road. And on 1 kilometer on the outer side of the Sardar Patel Ring Road. So many portions of that road also cover agriculture zone, industrial zone, residential 1, residential 2, which is comparatively low density zone. But if it is overlaid by the residential housing affordable zone, what it means that along with the uses permissible in the base zone, the residential housing is promoted. And for the residential affordable housing, we have also made some special provisions in our development control regulations regarding to the chargeable FSI. So the chargeable FSI is provided as a lesser value. The calculation of the floor space index and the exemptions in the FSI are also a bit more relaxed in the residential affordable housing. So by providing this financial and the design incentives, the residential affordable housing can be created. And one of the finest urban infrastructure is 76 kilometers of running road, of running length of the Sardar Patel Ring Road. Along the entire periphery, we have provided the affordable housing overlay zone. And this is on the serial number 12. The provision for the base FSI and the chargeable FSI are mentioned. So in the RAH zone, which is not an overlay zone, but the zone particularly provided only for the affordable housing, the base FSI or the free FSI is 1.8. So only the development charge has to be paid for that particular development. Over and above, we have the concept of fungible FSI or the permissible FSI or premium FSI, as various states call it. So we call it chargeable FSI here in Gujarat. And in normal cases, it is charged at 40% of the circle rates. But in the affordable housing zone, in order to make it affordable and to bring down the cost, the 0.9 chargeable FSI over and above the base is allowed at is allowed at 30% of the circle rates. And the maximum permissible FSI is 2.7. So by reducing the cost of the chargeable FSI, the overall housing cost can be reduced. Further, we use the concept of the town planning scheme or the land readjustment, and this has served the state pretty well. The land readjustment or TP scheme model is quite simple in its nutshell. Whenever the city is urbanizing on the fringes and the urban expansion is taking place on the periphery, what we do is we take up an area and undertake land readjustment. So on the left hand side in this slide, we can see the land parcels A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And it's a typical rural urban fringe where the where the land parcels are not so geometrically organized, even the road network is devoid of a proper urban geometry. So all these plots are taken up. They are reconstituted as far as possible. The original, the final plot, we call it OP, which is the original plot, which is the farmland, and FP is the final plot, which is the serviced urban land after the reconstitution is undertaken. So as far as possible, the FP is retained at the same location. Some minor shifts may be required at times. But in doing this reconstitution, we reserve some part of land for park. We reserve some part of land for commercial sale. And this is the tool that the state has been using for a long period of time. There is a deduction because the land required for roads and other infrastructure and the common amenities, there is equal percentage of deduction. We undertake normally 40% of deduction. So people having various sizes of original plot, they end up giving different area in the deduction. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, they have their OP of different sizes. Their FP are again of different sizes. The deduction in acres is different, but what is important is there is an element of equity. The percentage of deduction is equal for everyone. We have been using this since quite some time. The first TP scheme was in 1915, and this is the town planning scheme. We recently completed the first TP scheme was actually implemented in 1925. So last year we completed 100 years of the TP scheme. This is the Jamalpur TP scheme that we have, and since then we have been using this tool quite regularly. This is the first TP scheme in the western part of Ahmedabad in 1946. This is an important slide where all the pieces like jigsaw puzzle that we are seeing, they are all TP schemes, which the city of Ahmedabad is prepared over this last period of 100 years. The gray colored patch that we see in between, that is the World Heritage City, the core city area. And the white colored patches we see are the airport and the cantonments and the other such railway station and other such areas. All the urbanizable area has been developed by using the tool of TP scheme. This is an example of the western fringe of Ahmedabad. We can see well-laid road geometries and also some developments coming up. This is on the western side. People acquainted with the geography of Ahmedabad. This is nearby the Sarkhej Gandhinagar highway. And this was in the early 2000s. This was land which was not so very well developed. So we can see the original Khasra numbers marked below on the development plan. And the red colored road network that we see is one from the development plan. And there were residential 1, which is high density zone, residential 2, which is medium density, and R3, which is low density zone. And in this area, when the TP scheme is taken up, this is the actual satellite image. It's an area of 5 kilometer by 3 kilometer that we are taking as a case. And when the TP scheme is taken up, along with the development plan DP roads, the TP roads are also very well laid down. And we can see various reservations or various land parcels identified with colors like green, which is a land reserved for park and garden. We can see blue colored, which is land which is sellable by the development authority. It can be auctioned in the open market through the prescribed procedure. And the proceeds can be used for the development of a TP scheme. We can also see yellow colored and light brown colored plots, which both almost look like the same in this slide. But the yellow colored are the land which are sellable for residential purpose, whereas the light brown colored land is taken into possession by the authority for development of socio-economically weaker section housing, SEWS housing. So the Act makes a provision for reduction of land or reservation of land to the extent of 10%. But in reality, the land is reserved to the extent of about 3.5, 2.5%, depending upon from case to case, which kind of affordable housing is required in which segment. And on this land, the development authority undertakes the construction of the ACWS housing. which is of the built-up area up to 35 square meters, and then it is allotted to the economically weaker section through a prescribed procedure. This is the Sardar Patel Ring Road I was speaking about, the red-colored road. And on the outer periphery of the red-colored of the ring road, about 1 kilometer buffer is demarcated, and the affordable housing, residential affordable housing zone has been allotted. This is how the Sardar Patel Ring Road again was created by using TP scheme. On the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, what we see is the number of series of TP schemes which are laid down one nearby the other in adjacent to other. And the road has been created without using the land acquisition tool. It has been the land for the ROW of the road has been taken into possession by the authority by using TP scheme as a tool. So acquisition has almost been negligible, barring some area where there was agricultural zone. This is the status of the TP schemes planned in the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, about 278 TP schemes in total. And this also indicates various stages, which are legal stages, preliminary, final, draft. But in total, 278 TP schemes have been prepared in the jurisdiction of Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation. 97 TP schemes are beyond the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporations in the area of Ahmedabad Urban Development Authority. So this gives a total figure. This is how the TP schemes have been prepared. Almost all the zones have been covered. We can see residential area. The total area under residential in Auda area is 54 kilometers square, out of which in the last column, 99.26%, almost 100% area, TP schemes have been prepared. Similarly, the residential affordable housing and the residential affordable housing overlay zone, the area is 81.49, and 100% of the area in the residential affordable housing zone have been taken up for the preparation of TP scheme. So in such areas, a large number of affordable housing have been created, combining the area of ODA and AMC together. In the few slides before, we had seen the colored final plots where reservations were demarcated. So in serial number 3, socially and economically weaker section housing, in the combined area of ODA and AMC, we have about 899 total number of plots which are available for construction of ACWSH housing. Many plots have already been constructed upon and the houses have been allotted. Many such plots are still available in stock on which affordable housing can be created. The total area is 1048 hectares. So this is the kind of land bank that the city is having for the creation of the socially economically affordable housing and yes, ACWSH housing. And in the affordable housing overlay zone, we can see in the statements mentioned at the end of this slide, the total number of private affordable housing developed by ODA and AMC is total 1,152 projects, and approximately 2 lakh units have been supplied. So this is the total supply of units by in the combined figure, the SWSS housing developed by ODA and AMC by the government, by the local government and local authority is 59,000, almost 60,000 units. Put together, a large chunk of affordable housing created by the private sector, which is quite important, is approximately 2 lakhs. So this is how ensuring supply of service land is done. This is the total number of TP schemes prepared in the state of Gujarat. So in Saurashtra region, North Gujarat region, South Gujarat, more than about 900 TP schemes have been prepared. And all the TP schemes that we prepare in the state, mandatory revision, mandatory reservation of socially economically weaker section housing is ensured. So there is no TP scheme in the state without the reservation of SEWS housing. I think I'll end at that. We have many benefits of TP scheme apart from the ACWS, but I'll end at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dave. I think you have very nicely explained to the audience how you are promoting affordable housing to the TP scheme, how in each TP scheme, affordable housing for the economically weaker sections is integrated. Thank you for the good narrative, and we would be in touch with you to have more nuanced pathways towards integrating affordable housing in the planning schemes. We would like to learn more from you.
Sure, madam.
So we'll connect you with you shortly.
Thank you. Thank you, madam. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, we would turn to the state of Kerala. Kerala provides another important perspective, particularly how the LIFE mission was integrated with PMAY Urban and addressed both housing and development challenges together. In this regard, we are pleased to have with us Ms. Apurva Tripathi, Director, Local Self-Government Department, Rural, Government of Kerala. Apurvaji, it would be valuable to hear about Kerala's experience in the integration of the LIFE mission with PMAYU, particularly drawing from your experience as the chief executive of the LIFE mission, and particularly the role of decentralized governance and local institutions, how these could play in improving the housing outcomes. Over to you.
Uh, Thank you so much. First, I would like a confirmation if my screen
Yes,
is.
yes, we can, and we can
Yeah.
hear you clearly.
Thank you. So, first of all, I would like to thank the Center for Public Policy on Habitat and Government of India for inviting us to this program. And there was a very meaningful discussions that have been held in this regard. So, as CEO of Life Mission in Kerala, I feel privileged to present before the participants. So, Life Mission was launched in 2016. It is a total housing scheme, means that it plans to cover all the houseless and the landless beneficiaries as part of the state's housing program. And in this regard, we have conversed with PMAYU as well in its first phase, and that is what I'm going to present today. So the presentation will basically be in three parts. We will be covering the convergence with PMAYU, then we will be looking at the best practices, and then we'll see that how, as far as PMAY 2 is concerned, how is Kerala placed in that regard. So coming to, and I'll try to take not more than 10 to 15 minutes, and I'll try to finish during that time. So coming to Life Mission, as of now, as of today, 5,03,000 houses have been completed in Life Mission. And in the last around 10 years, 20,000 crore rupees have been spent on the housing project. It's a mass scale housing program. So the idea is that while making the scheme, the beneficiary is at the center of the scheme. So the state went ahead and made the unit cost for housing 4 lakh rupees. And for the tribal communities which are living in remote areas, the cost is 6 lakh per unit. And this was done way back in 2016. And not just the housing, it has a convergence mechanism with the community and with other stakeholders that are in place, because house is just not the four walls that we are going to construct. It is an integrated mechanism, and when we get one beneficiary, it actually changes the life of the family around that house. So it has also been recognized by Niti Aayog as one of the best models for affordable housing in last year's edition that was published. And we have worked with alongside Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana urban, rural, and in urban we have completed 1 lakh houses in the our target was 1,13,000. So around 90, more than 95% completion we have done there. So coming to the beneficiary-led construction vertical, so there is 4 lakh that is provided for each unit. 1.5 is from the Government of India Central Assistance. 2.5 is the state plus ULB share. So one interesting thing here that I just wanted to highlight, that we have over the past 8 years, starting 2018, 22, 2025, we have utilized HUDCO as an agency to take loan on behalf of the local bodies, and that is in turn deducted from the development grant over a cycle of around 10 to 15 years, depending on the quantum of the loan. So over the period of last 8 to 9 years, we have taken loan of around 7,000 crores for financing these houses. So when I say that 2.5 lakh is the state plus ULB share, generally it happens that 50,000 is borne by the state and 2 lakh is borne by the urban local body from their development grants. So that is one financing model to it. Since it's a large scale model, so all the urban local bodies, or in fact all the local self-government institutions, whatever are their requirements, depending on the number of beneficiaries that they have in the life list, what will be the requirement that they need to meet to provide their share, that is calculated, and accordingly we take loan on that behalf. Principal is borne by the local body, the interest is borne by the state government. Another thing that Life Mission initially did was completion of legacy houses. So all the houses which were incompleted prior to the scheme, so a concerted effort was made for completion, and 99% of those houses we were able to complete. Another thing, that since Kerala is in terms of climate and disaster, it's very vulnerable. So, and house where the center of an individual's being, in that situation, the government came up with home insurance, a unique protection measure for all the houses. So we have insured the houses that has been built as part of Life Mission, and the premium has been borne by the state government. Coming to the vertical part of it, the affordable housing partnership. So the per unit dwelling cost, it comes around 13 lakhs. As of now, we have 10 affordable housing partnership complexes as part of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban. Total, we have around 23 ongoing projects, 4 have been completed, and as of now, we have delivered 1,072 flats, which are in, so there are various verticals in which it is done. Some are done as per sponsorship category, some has been built entirely by the local body, some has been built with Life Mission plus the local body. So various manner in which these projects have been done. So around 1,072 flats have been delivered, and around 1,000 more flats are under construction. So there is one interesting part about here that I wanted to highlight. So a few years back, a land mobilization campaign began. It is called Mansodi Tiri Man. It means that from your heart you give. So around, in this, private individuals, public, they came forward and promised land for the houseless, to provide houses for the Life Mission beneficiaries. We got 30.75 acres were promised, and out of which 29.84 acres land we have registered. So that is one community-led, public-led initiative that was done. Apart from that, we have received certain sponsorship also, and foundations have worked with us for purchasing land for landless beneficiaries. It was also a critical part of the extreme poverty eradication program that the government of Kerala did. Shelter was a critical component of it, and we were able to cover majority of the beneficiaries. Those beneficiaries for whom land was not able to, when land was not able to purchased because of certain difficulty, or individual cannot stay with, do not have any other family member to stay. In those cases, the local self-government institutions, they were enabled to accommodate those individuals in rental accommodation. And then we have used LGSF technology for the 4 complexes that has been delivered. Coming to the best practices in terms of community-led delivery system and multi-scheme convergence, just quickly brief what has been done. So there is a state government scheme, Ayangali Urban Employment Guarantee Scheme. It provides 90 days, percent of wage employment, and as of now, around 90 to 100 CR has directly been supported for house construction. Then, as everyone is aware, we have convergence with SBM Urban, with NULM, and the interesting part is that Kutum Shri helps in the mobilization of these beneficiaries in the ward level committees, in getting the construction material, in pooling the resources. So NULM also has been a great support for Life Mission. Then we have convergence with Ujjwala scheme, Ayushman Bharat scheme, and as I mentioned previously, we have so the housing complexes where they are built and other, if there are individual units, so we ensure that there is proper waste management facility, there is proper electricity. All these things are ensured for a house to be finally being considered as completed. So Kudumshri has been the backbone, the structure that supports Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban. So from the beneficiary identification to women-led construction to community monitoring and to information dissemination, Kudumshri plays a critical role, and this role has been recognized at multiple forums at Government of India, at HUDCO, at Scotch. And now coming to how do we align with Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban 2.2. Just so currently two major reforms that has happened. One is the same day building permit gets issued for the beneficiaries who are part of life scheme or any other housing scheme. Basically, life is the umbrella under which all housing schemes operate. So there is same day permit. Basically, you apply, you get the permit. There is no other time taken for it. Then we have land transfer related. There is stamp duty exemption that has already been provided. Coming to parts which are currently under formulation, affordable housing zone in master plan and land bank creation is currently under preparation. Then EWS reservation in large projects, Model Tenancy Act adoption, they are also under review. And land rights patta for landless, we are doing that through providing houses for the landless beneficiaries, and it is also going to be part of state's affordable housing policy as recommended by Niti Aayog also, that what has to be the constituents of the affordable housing policy. So it is implemented in some sense, but it will be taken up further. So coming to affordable housing and PMAY 2. So the currently state has constituted, is in process of constituting high-level committee. The terms of reference have been finalized, and for rental housing also similarly, the terms of reference are already there. The committee has went through the details of it and has already furnished the recommendations to the state. So both these items are under consideration, and within a short time that is going to be evolved. And as I mentioned previously, the other items, it will be included within the affordable housing policy framework. So when we talk about Life Mission, what is the model that we are trying to tell? The model is that for a house is everybody's dream, but in Kerala more so, because if you go around and see the houses in Kerala, it is like a lifelong dream of people to have their own house. And the scheme recognizes that the cost that incurs to make a house. So going ahead and like government taking the ownership of that in that socialist architecture. So 4 lakh rupees for a unit cost. Then technology adoption that I have mentioned regarding the housing complexes that has already been made. 4 such LGSF technology adoption houses are already completed. There are many other which are under progress. Then community architecture, Kudumshri-led. It's a Kudumshri-led, women-led construction that happens in PMAYU. And then we have integration with multiple schemes. And now we are at a reform pathway when we bring the affordable housing policy, the tenancy, model tenancy laws, and how to incorporate the land bank within this housing policy framework. So this is the way forward for Kerala, and these are the items that Kerala has done, which can provide some framework on how to go ahead. This is one of the projects that has been completed. And that is all regarding Kerala's urban housing model. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
An excellent presentation. A lot of learnings for us for the center here on public policy. We have now heard perspectives across 3 important levels of the housing policy conversation, the global experience, India's national housing policy, and the state level approaches to address housing and habitat challenges. There are clearly several common threads running through these conversations, from affordability and land to planning, finance, institutions, as well as implementation. At the same time, the experiences of different states demonstrate that there are multiple pathways through which these challenges can be addressed. To bring together the key messages from today's discussion, I request Dr. Devaprita Roy, who is leading the research wing from the Public Policy Center, to condense these messages and from today's discussion, and I would like to invite her for the key takeaways from today's sessions. If you could please put together.
Thank you very much, ma'am, and a big thank you to all the panelists for extremely insightful and practical observations and reflections. Three key takeaways emerged from today's discussion, whose remit possibly extends beyond just urban housing on ownership as well as on rental basis, but it extends to the entire urban and development sector that is sitting here and listening to you. The first key takeaway is that the policy framework in India is more or less in place, right? And it is evolving. More importantly, these are increasingly being reviewed through a dynamic lens. The policies are not static, and not just at the level of Government of India, but also at the level of the respective states, as we saw today. What is key to making these policies work are institutions. Institutions are key for addressing housing needs at scale. This is very much evident from the experiences of 3 states that we heard today. Strong institutions along with robust coordination across these institutions. Coordination across the national, state, and city levels, that is effective vertical coordination. For example, the new innovative home loan product, which is being developed by the Department of Financial Services and IBA, as Kuldeep sir mentioned, it is much required that states gradually and the bank branches which are situated in the smallest towns and cities of each state of India gradually become aware of such products, such innovative products that actually make home loan accessible to somebody who till date has been outside the remit of formal institutional finance. There is also institutional coordination required at the horizontal level, right? As a seamless coordination among the various agencies at the state level, which was actually brought out by each of the states that we heard from. And seamless coordination also among the various agencies at the city level across the ULBs and the parastates. The second big takeaway from is that, as highlighted by each speaker in some form or the other today, the role of non-institutional factors and agencies. That is the role of community-led institutions, civil society organizations, and even NGOs. Their efforts are extremely critical and much required to complement the efforts made by the government and the various institutions, right? To make this happen, the onus lies with both the institutional and the non-institutional actors. The institutional actors brings the processes, heavy lift the financial needs of the projects, as PMAYU has done, and incorporates the most optimal technologies, again, as PMAYU has done, among the many other things that the institutional actors do. The non-institutional actors, like the community organizations and the NGOs, they add value to the institutional efforts by filling in the gaps, act as a conduit between the community, the government, and the institutions. For example, they can enable access to home loans by acting as conduits between lenders and households if necessary, make the community understand, help them make the decision and the final transition to their new housing to help them tide over the issues associated with vertical living as compared to living in tight slum networks as they're used to. The role, and may I go as far as to say that the owners of all these non-institutional actors, and that includes CPPHH, Center for Public Policy of Housing and Habitat, and NIUA, is to get involved with the institutions in such a way that they help in streamlining and add value to the entire process of housing development for those who need it the most. It is important that we do so not in a piecemeal and only pie with more, but we ensure that by coordinating our efforts, we are able to support programs like PMAYU at scale. We at NIUA-CPPHH are in the process of reaching out to agencies, organizations who are involved in this mission across the civil society, academia, and private sector to come together as a collective for furthering and adding value to the policy discourse and help our practitioners with their efforts. If you belong to any such organization and are listening in today, do drop me an email. Finally, the third takeaway and the last one. This brings us back to the policy table. It is very clear from the World Cities report that housing has to be on the basis of household need and not just demand. We need this to factor in this at the city level. PMAY subsidies, there's exactly this bridge the gap between need and create a demand, right? But by their subsidies provided to the households and even to the developers. At CPPHH, we are currently at present working on a study which identifies how many houses are needed at what price cost in the largest of the Indian metros and actually where are those houses needed in those cities. There is also a similar story on the supply side because in big cities, you depend on developers and for developers to build flats and apartments because independent housing, is not possible. Also, you depend on schemes like AHP, etc. But and for this, of course, schemes like AHP under PMAY use there, and this is buttressed by the various affordable housing policies that each state has through the various incentives that this affordable housing policies embed in them, and also through various schemes like the priority sector lending norms that RBI has, tax rebates under income tax, etc. Now, but assessing the on-ground impact of these incentives and subsidies, coupled with the time taken for the non-construction activities, approvals, etc., is very essential. We at CPPH will also attempt to add to this understanding so as to make the affordable housing policies and the incentives provided therein more impact. To conclude, I would like to say implementation needs to have the backing of efficient institutions and sound policy, and both need the help of a rigorous empirical evidence base, necessitating not just a housing ecosystem, but an ecosystem of practitioners, civil society, global organizations like Human Habitat, researchers, and policymakers like us to come together. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Devakrita. As we come to the close of the inaugural webinar of the Housing and Habitat Policy Dialogues, I would like to thank each and every one of the speakers and participants for making this a rich and substantive discussion. I'm sorry that we do not have time for a Q&A. However, I feel that the presentations have been very comprehensive and they have also addressed the questions which have come to mind of the audience. And if there are specific questions, you can write to us and we will get back to you on those specific questions. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Shri Kuldeep Narayan, the chair of today's webinar, for sharing India's experience with PMAY-U and the evolution of our affordable housing policy. Our sincere thanks to Ms. Ana Claudia for her keynote message and also for setting the global context for today's conversation. I would also like to thank our colleagues from UN Habitat Headquarters and India Office for taking us to the World Cities Report 2026 and for helping us connect its global findings to the Indian context. And a very special thanks to our state representatives, Ms. P. Ramana Saraswati, Mr. Harpal S. Dave, and Ms. Apurva Tripathi for bringing very eloquently the perspectives and experiences of the states of Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, and Kerala into today's discussion. The objective of the Housing and Habitat Policy Dialogues is to facilitate knowledge exchange and informed dialogue and ultimately contribute to more effective, inclusive, and sustainable urban housing solutions in India. Today's conversation has been an important first step in that direction. We hope that this series will continue to bring together policymakers, practitioners, researchers, state governments, and other stakeholders to examine the most important housing and habitat challenge that the country is facing, and more importantly, to translate knowledge and dialogue into actionable policy solutions. Thank you once again for joining us. We look forward to welcoming you in the next Housing and Habitat Policy Dialogue. Thank you and a very good evening to all of you.